We are having this very special interaction with BCG Asia Pacific Chairman Neeraj Aggarwal joining us on ET Now. Neeraj, thank you very much for your time.
It's a
Great
pleasure,
to have
Ajay.
you.
It's a pleasure.
So, Neeraj, you work with thousands of corporations in Asia, in India, many countries. First, I'd like to get your thoughts on how has the world changed. And now they say that the world is divided into two, pre-COVID and post-COVID. Especially the businesses and countries, the relationship. How are you looking? What are some of the big changes you're observing?
So look, the world is going through, unprecedented, deep geopolitical issues and huge economic uncertainty. We're not coming back to any pre-COVID levels at all. I see four vectors of change. One of them is this deep ideological difference and hence this ensuing tension between US and China. The second is this whole, the immediacy of war in Ukraine. There is the third point is about rising inflation, which at somewhat unprecedented levels. And the fourth, more broader point is the rise of populism and nationalism at extreme level. But if I was to add one more thing beyond that, is this climate and sustainability challenge, which is becoming more and more front and center for everybody. So those is what I would call as the challenges which are there all around us, and our clients are, everybody's in the midst
Dealing
of this,
with it.
dealing with this, exactly.
So, Neeraj, okay, let's talk about the big point is on growth front. They're talking about India, which is emerging as a shining star amidst all this global uncertainty. But rest of the world, how serious is the growth problem in rest of the world in your view? Do you see a shallow correction, which US will see? How deep entrenched is the slowdown in China? What is your sense? Are we taking it lightly? Is it big enough to be worried? Or the world will deal with it and we have taken steps in that direction?
So look, I've learned time and time again that the economists struggle to get this right. So predicting the amount of recession, how deep it will be, how long it will be is always a hard act. I can tell you the sentiment from the client side.
Sure.
I think what I'm seeing is huge polarization of perspectives. Some are feeling quite down and some are feeling, I wouldn't say bullish, but feeling confident about being able to deal with this, right? And the polarization varies. If you're in Europe, I think there is more negative sentiment than positive. If you're in US, probably it's middling. And if you're in Asia, it is more positive than negative. So I will say there's a tilt change depending on which continent you're talking about, right? The reason why do I say this? Because it depends on the dynamic of your industry. Are you a highly exporting industry? Are you exposed to commodities? Are you exposed to currency? All of those things are, so there's a macro factor of the continent, but there is a micro factor of your company's context which also comes into play.
And they say that, amidst all this geopolitical uncertainty, growth-related challenges by various economies, India is actually emerging in its own way, and also in light of how we played the healthcare diplomacy well, helping so many countries at a stretch, how we also navigated through energy-related crisis because of the war, and India is now emerging as a reliable trade partner kind of a status to many large corporations across the world and economies. Is all of this coming in interaction with some of your large clients globally?
So I think if you look at desirability, feasibility, and implementability, so I think the desirability of India has absolutely is changing. Some of it due to our own factors, where things which India has done have been quite remarkable. I think the digitization of India has been a shining star. Everybody in the world looks up to what India is doing. The model of India can be embraced by so many parts of the world. I think the American and the European model of digitization is not easily scalable to the global south. So you look at countries in Southeast Asia like Indonesia, Philippines, when I travel there, when they ask the question, they're not asking me the question about how Americans and Europeans do it. They either want to know what China did, or more often than not, they actually want to know what India is doing. So I remember, it's a funny story, I remember 10 years ago, most Indians used to say, okay, what are the startups happening in other parts of the world, and I'll try and bring that here. Now these people are asking, oh, what's happening in India? I will try and bring it to my market. And we're not even talking about Africa, right, which is going to be a large part of the world's population in times to come, which also wants to copy. So I think India is becoming a template for a sizable part of the world. So I think that's one thing. So our desirability, and also I think the government policy has been consistent for a long. People like predictability, right? I think so that has been good. I think goods and services tax, some of the reforms on RERA, etc., have been phenomenal. beyond the infrastructure build, on the physical infrastructure side, the ports, the intercity roads, all of those are adding boost to the economy, right? And I think there is also this beauty of the diversity of India, right? Everybody is trying to become a better version of themselves. I think it is good to be seen as somebody who's, I think good actions are being rewarded, even for politicians, right? I think the market feedback is corrective in that sense. So I think all of those are good signs from a desirability of India perspective. Now, there is still an angle of implementability. I think this creates the macro opportunities, but I equally feel we have to put our head down and implement for the next decade. I think we should not get complacent, neither should we get arrogant.
Correct. So, the calls that in the next decade actually belongs to India are getting louder. Every day you would have observed in the last couple of months, almost every day, one large corporation head or some financial institution head or somebody or the other who matters in the global business world is talking about the India opportunity on the front page of Economic Times. It's not been seen for a very long time. What are your thoughts on the decadal opportunity India offers ahead?
No, look, in the boardrooms that I am in, there's a lot of excitement about India. I would say this. That being said, I always tell this to our clients. When you feel good, you're not that good. And when you feel bad, you're not that bad. So I want to temper the euphoria a little bit, because the reason I want to temper it is not because the opportunity is not there, because I don't want, back to the point, I don't want us to get complacent. I don't want us to get arrogant. But that being said, yes, the euphoria is at an all-time high. Our global board is coming down to Delhi in the month of December. There are 18 people in a board. There are 14 countries represented. All of them are incredibly excited about the possibilities of India.
So, a few years back, as they would say that every company would sit in their boardrooms and discuss, okay, all of that is okay, you're doing well globally, but what's your China plan? Because people wanted to dedicate resources for a dedicated and specific China plan. Are those kind of conversations now getting started for India? What's your India plan is a kind of question being spoken to many corporations in their boardrooms?
So I think most of our clients want to become more resilient. So resilience means they want to diversify their supply chains. They want to diversify their consumer base. So some companies which had as much as 60% exposure to China, right? They're feeling that is not tenable for a long period of time, right? And China will also grow in a lot of domestic consumption. So they often have what is the other places which can fill up for that huge demand, because China in some places was a humongous demand for them, right? If you're an iron ore producer, the amount of iron ore China will consume is gargantuan. So now, what are the alternatives? India is clearly a shining star as an alternative, but there's also Vietnam, there's also Philippines, there's also Bangladesh, and to some extent Indonesia. So that's why I said that we are yes, the winds are in our favor, but let's seize them, right? Let's build sails when the winds are blowing so that we can go far.
Sure, fair point. So let's talk about some of the specific opportunities. China plus one was one particular point. Now people are talking about Europe plus one as well. And we are seeing a lot of global MNCs, which are also listed in India, talking about upping their India game. Not only for the domestic market here, but also making this as a kind of a second line alternative to China or many other parts as a global export opportunity. How real is this for us?
When you say global export, meaning them exporting to India or using India as a hub for exporting?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So I think there are two things you said here, Ajay. One is, firstly, let's remove this notion that the MNCs are only Americans and Europeans. Sure. There's also a lot of Japanese MNCs, there's lots of Korean MNCs. I mean, the MNCs in every part of the world, right? So I was in Japan recently, and I want to tell you a story from that. We all know the Maruti Suzuki story, right? Or they look at that as the poster child. But there are many Japanese companies which are saying, we want to be the Maruti of the next decade. Excellent. That's just one story, right? So many such stories can unfold. The relationship between India and Japan are very warm, very cordial. There's a cultural affinity. There's a deep bond there, right? So I saw a lot of intrigue, but actually also some element of, but it's a complex market. We need to understand and unravel it, right? So I feel if we do the right things, in so many places, capital is willing to come to India. And talking about capital, it's not only the capital that MNCs bring, but also the capital in private equity, the capital in venture capital, has a huge migration from Europe towards Asia. The dry powder, which wants to be deployed, is hugely migrating to Asia. And when I talk to those investors, India, certainly in Asia, is the #1 priority, by far.
voice that instills trust.
My experience, based on what I've done in the last 20 years, these are the times where you don't panic, and if you stay committed to your financial planning, you will be rewarded. The bulls are saying, look, this is markets which are telling you that the future will be much brighter than what the past was.
The voice that commands respect.
You should remember that every bull market is higher than the last one.
The voice that is always ahead of the curve.
Maybe later this summer, I'll buy more gold and silver.
Domestic is already at 60% capacity and going towards 80%, but we need more growth in international.
The voice that does not falter.
How do you convert this crisis into an opportunity? We will become stronger. We will survive this storm. With each passing day, this market is only telling you that if you've participated on every decline, you've actually made money.
Catch India's most experienced market anchor, Nikunj Dalmia, only on ET Now.
Rakesh Junwala wants to go easy on trading. He does not want to trade as aggressively as he did, let's say, couple
But
of
I
years
always
ago.
used to, I have felt that for the last 25 years. कि क्या करो अभी छोड़ दो ट्रेडिंग में वो छुट्टी.
Once a trader, always a trader.
Let's talk about some of the sectors, because over the last 25 years of your company operating here, I would like to know how has the mix of clients changed. Now we are getting some sectors which are coming on our channel and talking about great opportunity and runway and order books and all, which have never been there. Like defense sector in the last 24 months has become very big. New energy is existing companies are talking about new energy, and newer companies are coming and talking about new energy. Sectors which are not around half a decade back or maybe a decade back. Tell us about your change in the mix of companies you're working with, and from outside also companies are willing to work here, which perhaps were not represented earlier.
So firstly, I think there's one dynamic in the boardrooms itself which is changing in India, which I would like to talk about. I think in 2000 to 2010, there was still this fear, because Indian companies are smaller, right? That, oh, can we really compete with the global firms? So there was this fear, and every time you'll have a discussion, people were quite intimidated. In, I think, the decade from 2010 to 20, it changed to, oh, we can compete with them, or we will learn from them and we'll bring those models to India with a lag of 12, 18 months at times. Now the mindset is, we can compete at equal terms. If not, even we can set the tone for others to follow. So I often say, if I use the cricketing analogy, the India of old used to feel like Kapil Dev's India when we won the World Cup, right? But we were a somewhat, how do I say it, shy winners. We almost felt like it was, we were capable, but, luck played a role. Now we are a bit like Virat Kohli's India. We feel like we belong, we ought to own the world stage. So that's the mindset which has changed in the boardroom. That's the mindset which is changing the entrepreneurs. Because ultimately it comes from, first and foremost, it starts in the mind. And our clients, to the question you asked, are these people who are incredibly ambitious. There's a gap between their aspiration versus their current reality. And they feel they need a catalyst along with them in partnership who can help them get to point A to point B. Sure. So those are the kind of companies which are clients for us. They can be across sectors. They can be across ownership types. They can be private sector. They can be public sector. They can be government. They can be not-for-profit. They come across all. They can be startups. So they come in all hues and shapes. Yes, when we started, of course, we had to start small 25 years ago. But today we are fortunate to work with, these are not the leading 100 companies. These are the most ambitious companies. Sure. They could be, I think that's what I come from.
So give us some insights into the sectors where you see some really great opportunities, where some good transformational work is actually happening.
Firstly, I think it's happening everywhere, to be honest. Indian consumers are growing like never before, right? So take consumer firms, take technology firms, they're growing. Indian export opportunity is phenomenal. Indian, if I may, So digitization is creating a huge platform for India. India is becoming the digitization capital of the world in the sense that we're creating our own model of digitization, right? And I think any sector, whether it is servicing their own end consumers using digitization or servicing global exports, is big, right? I would say that. Climate and sustainability used to be an obligation till some time ago. I think it's becoming a huge opportunity. So EV, renewables, green hydrogen, you name it, I think India can set the platform for others in the world to follow. I'm also excited about the tilt in the manufacturing more recently. The PLI schemes have been actually quite remarkable. I see people talking about opportunities they were not talking about before, right? So I think that the entrepreneurs, the Indian leaders are hungry to go bolder on those things. I think that is actually genuinely phenomenal. Then even old industries which have been, not, I shouldn't call them old, but established industries now like IT, like pharma, they want to take the next leap. Like we want to move from generics pharma to innovative pharma, right? You know, all of those things are incredibly exciting.
So in technology, there are three-way work which is happening. One is government-led initiatives to bring the citizens of the country in mass into the system. That kind of technology work, Aadhaar, the JAM Trinity. Then there is a lot of organizations, older or newer economy companies, which are wanting to embrace technology like never before and make a game of scale as far as the business is concerned. There is the third leg of technology, which is internally transforming their processes, getting more efficiencies into the company. Are you getting enough opportunity, all the three sides?
You're right. There are, I think there are native technology companies and there are people who acquire technology and embrace technology. Native are, they're born with technology first, right? So I think there are tons of native technology companies and they're growing ever so fast in India. But I think what is exciting is earlier people used to do technology, and I think COVID changed that because everybody saw the benefit of technology in fulfillment, in getting to the consumers better, in not getting impacted by all the constraints that came within. So people are moving from embracing technology only in sales and marketing, only in finance, to across the value chain. So they're becoming end-to-end integrated technology companies. That's the mind. And now, once they do that, then they're saying, okay, that's not good enough. I want to layer analytics on top of that. So I want to figure out, so imagine, like, even if you're a mining company, or you're a steel making company, or a cement making company, or whatever, right? You will expect that technology only plays so much of a role. These are, existing businesses, but even in their kiln processes, right? The way the raw materials get mixed, small tweaks in that ratio can actually result in superior outcomes. All companies, all hues and shapes, and government spend itself, it's getting more and more directed. The India stack is revolutionary again.
What about manufacturing? There's a lot of work happening from the government side to kickstart massive manufacturing here, be it electronics, automobiles, the new generation automobiles, or many other stuff, which you are up till now importing. So they're trying to change our import mix. I mean, it appears that they've taken a list of what are the large defenses a big import, right? So all of that is being promoted here. Where do you see very good transformational work happening in our manufacturing side?
The manufacturing as a share of our GDP has been 17% for a very long time. There's been a lot of push to increase it to the 20s. I think for the first time, I'm beginning to feel more confident that we have a real chance to get into the 20s. Why do I say that? I think the current design of PLI schemes, if I look from the client perspective, because the one thing is the government has designed, but I see client traction on that. I see clients getting energized about that. So that is good. I see openness to that. So let me give you a few examples. EV is going to change the world. India will be one of the largest consumers of EV along with China in the world, right? I see that revolution happening in India in a major way. Take another one. Take the whole semiconductor space. Semiconductors have become the new oil, right? I mean, this whole battle in the world is, you've been reading in the press and we've been reading about a lot of interest and intrigue. Now that's a big investment. It could run into tens of billions of dollars. That's an important enabler for foundational technology for time to come, right? The whole Silicon Valley revolution, if you really go back in time to, Fairchild was the first semiconductor company, which inspired the whole, if you trace back the tree of Silicon Valley, every connection ultimately dates back to there's actually a chart there which says Fairchild started it all and everything else spawned from that. So I think some of those are great enabling factors. I also would like to say, even in new areas, like there's interest in climate and sustainability related technology, green hydrogen. Now these are yet to be proven technologies as to what will be viable, but the interest, and these may need very sizable investment, but I think the interest is really there.
Do you also see, because of this, perhaps now in India for the first time or after a very long time, high quality and high value work will happen. Up till now, we perhaps only focus on the top line growth, right, or in volume terms on unit sales. But now complex work will happen where we will be able to, Indian corporations in their balance sheets will be able to derive more value for shareholders, complex high quality work. That could be a trend for next decade?
Absolutely. All the examples you see what I'm giving you, semiconductors, green hydrogen, EV, these are all complex. These are not low-grade assembly operations. These are also operations where you combine the power of software and hardware. So India's software skill also comes in handy there, because now you can combine software and hardware. Because none of these are, you can't pull one away from the other. I think the new manufacturing approach is very technology-led, and our strength in technology allows us to pull manufacturing towards us.
What are the government initiatives which caught your attention? They've been at it for some time now, but some of the stuff which you really, may call it as an enabler of this entire ecosystem which we are moving towards into?
I think a few things which are the PLI scheme that I already called out, which are very specific by different industries itself. I think that's been quite well designed. Combine that with what the center government is doing, but also what the state governments are doing. Sure. I think I love the fact that when they compete with each other, because that's the spirit you want, right? Then you combine that with free trade agreements. I think there's been a lot of more recently a takeoff point on multiple free trade agreements happening. I still think there's more room to do better there, but you're seeing many bilaterals coming through. So I think that push is very good from the Commerce Ministry. So I would call those out as certainly.
And what about consumer side? A lot of companies you would be working with are direct B2C kind of plays. There's a very big rising consumer middle class, and more people are now entering the middle class. Their consumption patterns are also undergoing a change. How do you see over the next 8 or 10 years this pool of people, the rising middle class, their consumption patterns become a driving force in overall growth?
Huge. So India's GDP per capita today is roughly $2,500, roughly. I mean, I'm
roughly.
Roughly. If you take the big cities, the number is mostly double, right? It's $5,000 GDP per capita. You roll the clock another 7, 8 years, as you're saying, the same number of 2,500, India's average. Now our population is flat, right? If you assume 7 to 8% GDP growth, which I think is certainly doable, right? By the end of the decade, you're roughly looking at doubling our GDP, right? So you're getting to be in the $6-7 trillion range, right? We can, with some push, we can get there faster, but we can, I hope so, and I sincerely want to be a part of shaping that, but I'm just trying to be a bit conservative in the discussion here, right? So if you get there, with the population flat, you're roughly looking at the GDP per capita doubling, right? In the cities, it will start hitting $10,000 GDP per capita. That's a very, anything which is in the range of $8,000 to $10,000 GDP per capita is a very high tipping point, because that's when you have enough to spare beyond your needs on education, on health and other things. So you'll start indulging into things, right? So there'll be a sizable middle class which will buy, every consumer will have different needs on where they want to trade up, but you will start seeing India being a at scale market on many products.
Great. It was a wonderful discussion, Neeraj. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure my viewers will get a lot to ponder over, and thanks so much for joining us on the show.
It's my pleasure, Ajay, and thank you for the opportunity.